Malcolm as we resume season 1 of My Space with Malcolm. We took a little bit of a break to work on a few things, but we're excited to resume that season today. This week's guest has known me for a long time, since I was a teenager. But for me, it's been a joy to watch her as she's become a wife, a mother, and as she's found her voice as a systems and self-care specialist. She's the founder and owner of 31 Marketplace, host of the Boss Talk podcast, and her new book, The Boss Shift, is out right now. So join me as we listen to this interview with Lavista Jones. Well, welcome everybody to My Space with Malcolm. I'm excited to have with us systems and self-care strategist Lavista Jones. Thank you, Lavista, for joining us today.
I'm excited to be here, Malcolm.
Yes. So Lavista has known me for a long time. When I was a young whippersnapper, still trying to figure out the world. And now she knows me as an adult who's still trying to figure out the world.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about a lot of things today, but you are the owner and founder of 31 Marketplace, host of the Boss Talk podcast, and your new book, The Boss Shift, is out right now. So we're going to talk about a little bit of all of that, but we're going to start from the beginning. Where did the journey start from you? You're an Ohio girl, right?
I am born and raised Ohio. Yes, I am an Ohio girl all of my days. Yes.
And now you're in Arizona.
Yes, I am in Arizona. I have been here, Malcolm, for 13 years.
Wow.
And it's crazy, as like a kid growing up, in my hometown, like I never wanted to leave like my hometown, like ever. I always just assumed like I would grow up, like graduate high school, get married and have babies, right? Like right there, like in my town. But never in a million years did I think that I'd be like 2,000 miles away from the place that is my home. The place that helped to shape me and have been gone for so long.
Wow. Yeah, I've been living in Ohio now for over, the math now is, I think it's been close to 15 or 16 years. And so people always ask me, so you're not from Ohio? I was like, no. So I name all the places I'm from. So where's home? And I was like, it should be Ohio, right? But I feel like all of my formative years were somewhere else. So Ohio still feels a little foreign to me, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I still refer to Ohio as home. So, I'll be traveling and I'm like, oh, I'm getting ready to go home.
Right.
And people know that I'm talking about coming back to Ohio. And when I am coming to the desert, even though I have been here for over a decade, I'm like, okay, now it's time for me to go back to the desert. So it is home for me now. Like, my family is here. But Ohio, that will always, like, those are my roots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Always home. So we know you now as an entrepreneur, but you had a pretty successful corporate life as well.
I did.
Can you tell us a little bit about your corporate experience and where you started?
Yeah, I actually already had my business before I went into corporate. It was actually the second time I had gone back into corporate America. It was 2008 when the economy, was in a decline, and I got headhunted to come in to help the bank put some systems and some structure in place to help the many clients, right, that they had at that point that were dealing with, like, I don't know what to do with my house. I can't afford this mortgage kind of a thing. And needing to put some structure in place, like, hey, here are these processes. Here's what we need to do. Here's how we need to interpret, what's going on with the Fed regulations and and actually make it happen. And honestly, it was only supposed to be like a 4-month gig, a temporary, like come in, get this like set up and then go ahead and leave. And that 4 months turned into 7 years and a transfer from Ohio to Arizona.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I went from, like I said, like not a part-time, but as a contractor to actually an assistant vice president within the company.
Wow. That's quite the jump. I mean, it's very rare to see somebody go from, usually if you're a contractor, there's definitely a cap on where you're going from there.
Yeah. Well, it was one of those things where, And not in an arrogant kind of way, but,
Mhm.
like, what I do well,
Yeah.
and I think that that conveys to those that, like, I work with and that I work for,
Yeah.
and so that just kind of propelled me into places that I didn't necessarily see myself going, but
Mm.
when opportunities presented themselves, it was like, "Okay, yeah, I can do that."
Yeah.
Like, "Yeah, I can do that
Yeah.
too." And that position actually it didn't even exist.
Wow.
It was actually literally created for me around the skill set that I brought to the table,
Yeah.
with that title of AVP.
Wow. So in your book, I believe every chapter is accompanied with a section. There's a section in every chapter that says embracing the shift. So what was the shift
Mhm.
for you? What was the moment that made you really kind of pivot from the corporate world into focusing more on your entrepreneurial exploits?
Yeah, for me, it was actually experiencing burnout,
Hmm.
in a really major way, and so in the book, I kinda talk about that relationship that I had with work. You're married, right? But you've seen,
Hmm.
like, those, like, Facebook statuses where it's just like, "What's your status? You single? You married?" It's
Right.
complicated, and so I would say that at that particular point in time, my relationship with work was complicated
Yeah.
because the work I loved doing it. I loved the people that I worked with. I loved the execution of the work. I loved all the traveling. Like, I really loved kinda everything about it.
Hmm.
But the complicated part was that I had really terrible boundaries,
Mm.
in self-care practice, and
Hmm.
so, a lot of things that I was doing, like not eating well, like not sleeping, like literally, like working all night, like multiple nights, like in a week, paired with, like, traveling all over the country, and so it's like one day I'd be in California, the next day I'd be in North Carolina. I can remember even a time where, like, my husband and I were coming home from Hawaii. I had a red eye coming in from Hawaii. We got to Phoenix around 7 AM, and by 11 AM, I was on another flight going to Atlanta to go to work.
Wow.
And so it was like that was just kinda like the pace that I pushed myself.
Hmm.
And eventually, ignoring those whispers that my body was giving me, like, "You're tired," or "You need to rest," or "You need this," and it's like, "No," like, I've got things I need to accomplish, I've got work that I need to do, um, and I ignored those little whispers for
Yeah.
a really long time, um, and eventually I kinda got hit with the cosmic 2 by 4 and my body is just like, nope. We're not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
We're not doing this anymore." And it was a progression. It was just like, I started off just kind of being really tired, and it's just
Hmm.
like, "Okay, I know how to deal with that. It's not resting, it's caffeine. Like, I need more
Hmm.
coffee, and I need, like, I need to give myself some more, like, go-go, right? So I can, like, keep going and keep doing what I need to do." And then I started developing, like, this headache that wouldn't go away. So no matter
Hmm.
how much, like, aspirin or Tylenol I took, it was just, like, this nagging thing. But it was like, and, I'm fine because 'cause I've got work I need to do."
Hmm.
And then, things started to progress where, like, I was getting emotional at work,
Wow.
getting feedback from, like, a peer or, like, my boss, like, "Hey, let's represent this trend differently, like, in this report." Like, that's not malicious,
Hmm.
feedback, but I would, like, walk away from those meetings and, like, start bawling, crying to the
Yeah.
point where I would have to, like, go outside and, like, get myself together and kinda give myself, like, that pep talk from, like, Tom Hanks and, like, A League of Their Own, like, "There is no crying in corporate
Yeah.
America, like, what is wrong with you?" But I couldn't just like, "Why am I so emotional?" And then I started trying to negotiate with my husband, like, "So, if you let me stay home today, I promise I will go to work tomorrow." And he's like, "Yeah, the way our mortgage is set up, you need to go to work every day." Like, "What are
Mhm.
you talking about?"
Right.
Because I couldn't explain to him what I was feeling, but I knew that, like, being in the environment wasn't helping me, right? It was
Yeah.
making things feel worse. And then eventually, I was driving into the office. I was on the 202, which is a major highway here in
Mhm.
the valley, and all of a sudden, I found myself like my palms are sweating and
Mm.
my heart is racing out of my chest, like my mind is racing. I'm crying uncontrollably. And I honestly don't even remember how I got to my office. I just
Mm.
remember getting there, parking. I was able to like navigate to my office and I like made 2 phone calls. Like, I called my husband and I'm like, "So, I'm coming home because I think I'm losing my mind." And then I remember calling a psychologist and was
Mhm.
like, "I need to be seen today
Mm.
because I think I'm losing my mind." And so, really, that first appointment, she was just like, "So, you're stressed out and you're experiencing burnout." And I'm like, "How, Sway? Like, I love my job." And she's like, "Lady, like, what is wrong with you?" Right? Like, you were sitting here telling me, like, like, your lack of sleep and your this, and I'm like, "But that's what I needed to do to get the work done, like, but I love it, like, how could this be harmful to me?" And it was just like, "Oh, like, maybe, just maybe I need to make a shift and do some things
Yeah,
differently." And that's when I decided to go back to work with clients privately
yeah.
instead of staying in corporate.
It's something that you said in your book that I also agree with. There's a saying that chafes at me every time I see it. Is you if you're doing what you love, you never work a day in your life. And you mentioned that in the book, and every time I hear it, I cringe just a little bit. I'm like, "Mm." But that's kind of the setup for us, like especially people that are doing what you love. It's like, oh, I love it, so I'll just push myself as hard as I can to get this
Mhm.
done, to get to that next level. Um, do you have that same reaction where you hear that when you hear that saying, like it just chafes against the very fibers of your of your being?
There's a lot of those sayings,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
Where it's just like that or like, like hustle,
Mhm.
grind it out or whatever, because I think that as a society, especially on the entrepreneurial side of work,
Yeah.
I think that we have been conditioned,
Mhm.
right? That if we work ourselves to exhaustion now,
Mhm.
that somehow that's going to eventually translate into this life that we want.
Yeah.
And I've not actually found that to be true. Like,
Mhm.
I have seen those, with professional careers and building businesses that are like working themselves literally into a grave. And it's just
Wow.
like, there's got to be a better way
Mhm.
to do this work again that we love. But as the subtitle of the book says, without sacrificing yourself to do it.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So for you, obviously that corporate job came with um a lot of stress that you were starting to feel and manifest not only in your body but in your family. But how
Mhm.
hard was it to make that step away, to take that step back from, what I assume was a pretty high paying job, a well paying job that had you in a good position. How hard was it to make that choice for yourself?
It was hard. It was very hard. It wasn't a decision I took lightly or that I made on my own.
Mhm.
My husband saw the impact that the work was having on me. And again, that's why I kind of keep going back to that it was complicated because I think it would have been different if, like, every day I woke up and I'm like, "Oh, I gotta go into this office, like, I
Yeah.
hate this effing job." Like, but that wasn't my story, like,
Mhm.
I loved the work that I did. Again, like, it was a position that was created just for me,
Yeah.
like, just with me in mind, right? So it was very hard to resign from that position, and then I also found, Malcolm, that it was actually hard to adjust to my new normal,
Mm.
right, as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
One, because I got a lot of or started taking a lot of identity from that
Mhm.
position, right? I'm an AVP at this particular, financial institution, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of weight that kinda comes with a position, like that. Walking away from that position, I also walked away from 60% of our overall household income.
Ooh.
So that was a big, adjustment to make, and it's just like, I knew that wasn't going to come overnight in the business,
Mhm.
right? So it's just like I went from the breadwinner to, like, I'm broke.
Mhm. Right. Yeah.
I am broke, broke, and, so there was a lot of identity stuff that I had to work through as well and kind of figure out my new place in, the partnership, like, with my husband, as I started building the business, so
Mhm.
lots of adjustments there.
Oh, yeah. So during this whole time, you are still doing, even while you were working full time, you were also doing, you're seeing clients and working with clients on the side. So
Mm-mm,
no, you were not.
mm-mm, no, no, well,
Okay.
when I got headhunted, I actually, shut down the business,
Okay.
at that time because it was like I couldn't do
Yeah.
both. Especially once I went beyond, like, that 4-month
Okay.
contract, like, at that point, it was just like, "Oh, like, this is a lot more involved than I thought," so then I needed to find new homes for the clients that I was working with because it was like, I can't divide my time this
Yeah.
way, and then I was kinda all in on the corporate side,
Wow.
so it wasn't until I actually resigned,
Uh-huh.
um, and it kinda went like this, like, I walked in, I resigned, and it's just kind of the way at most financial institutions are like, "Okay, like, I'll give you, like, my 2 weeks," and they're like, "Well, you can leave today."
Oh, yep.
And I'm
Mhm.
like, "Alright," and, went home, packed to go to Maui, went to Maui for a week and came back with 0 clients and was like, "Alright, so I guess we're doing this now, right? Like,
Wow.
let me go figure out how to pave my path in the marketplace now."
Wow. And that takes us to 31 Marketplace.
Yes.
And I in the book you break down how you got the name, but I'd love for you to explain to
Mhm.
the audience. I love where this came from, by the way, but I don't want to spoil it. I
Yes?
want to let you tell it. So
Okay.
where did the name
Alright.
31 Marketplace come from?
So, the name 31 Marketplace is actually, my attempt to pay homage to the Proverbs 31 woman
Hmm.
from the Bible.
Yeah.
Um, she is an example I think that a lot of women, at least, like, women of, like, Christian faith, are familiar with, that we often compare ourselves to a
Hmm.
lot. And it's just like, oh, she did this and she did that and she did this and she did that. At least that's what scripture tells us. And, okay, she did do those things. But I think that there is one little piece in there that I think is often overlooked. And it talks about her getting food together for her maidservants.
Yeah.
And it's just like, if you don't catch that, you miss the part where
Yeah.
she had help doing all of the things, like, she did a lot of amazing stuff, but she didn't do it all on her own,
Hmm.
and so I have, a point of view that, like, vision is not a solo gig, it shouldn't be for us, it wasn't for her, right?
Yeah.
So if we're gonna use her as an example, let's use her as a full example
Yeah.
in showing that she was able to actually delegate to get things done to fulfill the vision that she had in the marketplace, in her season of life, and so it's, paying homage to her and also going like that extra mile of saying, "Hey, you as the visionary, not only, do you want to bring like this vision forth, you also have to take care of the visionary,
Yeah.
yourself, right?" And so that is, the full meaning behind the name 31 Marketplace.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, we always I think when we all a lot of people, I'll say a lot of people think about strong black women, it's they're independent. They did it. They,
Yeah.
they didn't need nobody, they didn't need no man, they didn't need no help. They did it themselves. And it's like, whoa, this like flips that completely on its head of no, a strong woman knows the task that maybe she doesn't need to do, knows when she needs help. That's a big theme, particularly in the beginning of the book, talking about
Mhm.
knowing when you need help and being willing to accept help um,
Without shame.
without shame. Yes, we're gonna talk about boss shame a little bit later.
Okay.
That part hit me
Okay.
pretty hard. Boss shame.
Okay.
Um, so you talked about the vision for 31 Marketplace, where it came from. Why
Mhm.
was it important for you to be a resource, particularly for women? I know it's not you're not. I wouldn't say exclusively, but that's your primary audience. And so, why
Mhm.
would you think that's important?
Um, that's interesting. I had, somebody asked me that at one of the book signing tours, and
Mhm,
it was another guy, right? Like,
mhm,
"Why, do you do that?" I'm like, "Well, I can only speak from, like, the perspective of a woman because
uh-huh,
I am one, right?"
mhm,
I think that women are kind of naturally wired to wear a lot of multiple hats, and I'm
mm,
not saying that men aren't,
mhm,
but, just looking at myself, right? Like, I am a daughter,
mhm,
I am a wife, I am a mother, I am a business owner.
mhm.
I wear a lot of different hats that I have to interchange like throughout the day. And I think that just to your previous point that we are kind of taught that like you take all of this
Yeah,
on and you do it all on your own, like that's the only way to make this happen.
yeah,
And I just don't think that that's true.
yeah,
And so it was very important for me to come alongside other women that had these aspirations and very ambitious and have these goals. And it's just like, I love the drive and the vision that you have. Let's make that happen using the resources that are
Yeah.
around you. Like raising your hand and saying, "Hey, I need support here, here, and here." It doesn't make you weak. It
Yeah.
actually makes you stronger because you have like the resources and that kind of gives you the fortitude to be able to do more. Like it increases your capacity
Yeah.
to do all the things that you want to do instead of like completely exhausting and depleting yourself
Mhm.
while you're trying to be superwoman.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's really good. That's really good. So you have your hands in a lot of different endeavors. Another one that you do is the Boss Talk podcast, but it
Mhm.
didn't exactly start off as a podcast. So tell us kind
Right.
of the origins of it and then the transition to the podcast format.
Yeah, so, I'm an introverted person,
Mhm.
believe it or not, and so but as a business owner, right, networking is essential
Yeah.
to growing your business, to be connected with other resources. It's really about who you know, right,
Mhm.
to get things done. So networking is very important, and so I found that, what I call kinda like traditional networking kinda left me feeling lacking, like, so, like, going and maybe listening to 20 or 30 people give like a 30 or 60-second commercial about what they do, or
Mhm.
maybe having somebody get up and give like a presentation about Tupperware, and it's
Mhm.
like, great, I know a lot more about this product now, but that's not helping me with like my marketing struggle when I go back to my office, or me feeling like I'm not as visible, in the marketplace as I need to, or like how am I going to increase like my client acquisitions, like that's the stuff that I'm dealing with right now,
Mhm.
like this is not helping me. And so, like, I knew that I wanted to do networking a little bit differently. And so I was like, well, I don't see out here what I want, so let me create it. And
Mm.
so Boss Talk actually started as a monthly networking event
Yeah.
where I would bring women together here in the Valley, and I would ask like one woman to if I could interview her during that time. And
Mhm.
so we would start off, and one of the things like I loved about it is instead of like coming and it's like, oh hey, I'm Lavisa. This is why everything is so amazing with my business. This is why you should work with me.
Uh-huh.
It was like, let's stop the posturing and
Yeah.
actually come here and let's get real about what you might be struggling with. And so when we would do introductions, it was like, tell us your name, tell us, who it is you serve so we can kind of know like, oh, this is somebody I should like send your way. And it was just like, and then tell us what you need right now.
Mm.
And at first people were like, "Tell you what I need." We're like, "What do you mean?" And I'm like, "What do you need? Like, what do you need in your business? What do you as the business owner, like, what do you need?"
Yeah.
So people would share like, "Oh, like I need a new laptop, or I need a social media person, or I need this." And what started happening is like, "Oh, well, I actually do that." And so then they actually could have like
Wow.
a much more um connected, conversation,
Yeah.
right? Because you're not trying to come there with some kind of front like, "Hey, I have everything going on, it's perfect,"
Yeah.
and I'm, like, trying to find clients. It's like, "I'm a business owner, I'm gonna keep it real, let you guys kinda peek behind the curtain about what's going on," because my hope was that either somebody in the audience was the answer to that need or was connected to it, right? But the only way that that need would be fulfilled is by us talking about it.
Yeah.
So, like, that's how we would start the introductions, and then we would, I would do, like, the interview with the business owner, and then, what I liked about it is that the audience could ask questions as well.
Wow.
So, about her journey, those kind of things, and those are kind of things we talked about, like, her failures,
Mhm.
the lessons that she learned from, like, her hard times in business, because I think that too often we are focused on, like, the highlights of stuff we see on social media,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
"Oh, you got this book deal," or "You're on this TED Talk stage," or whatever, but nobody's talking about the fact that, like, your book proposal got rejected 17 times,
Mm.
or that you have applied to be a TEDx speaker, 10 times, and every single time they're like, no, pass. We don't want you," or "The
Yeah.
topic is not good enough," or whatever.
Yeah.
But those are the kind of things we started talking about, and it
Wow.
was just like they were very resonant because it's like, "Oh, well, I see you on social, but now I'm sitting here listening to you like you're having the same struggles that I have." So it was
Mhm.
kinda one of those things like, if she can do it, then I can do it. So
Yeah.
you were finding like motivation and inspiration, your needs were getting met. And so, but people kept describing it, they were like, "Well, okay, this is not like a typical networking thing." They were like, "It's like a podcast with like an audience." I'm like, "But it's not though.
Mhm.
It's a networking event." They were like, "Okay, right." But like they kept describing it that way. And then COVID hit.
Uh-huh.
And so we weren't able to meet in person the way that we had been for the first couple of years. But I knew that the conversations were still very needed and still very important.
Yeah.
And so then that's when we moved into the more traditional podcast format.
Okay. Wow.
Yep.
So, do you think how do you think it's changed with the new medium? Do you obviously it's not the networking event that it was before, but what are the cool things that you've seen kind of evolve out of Boss Talk in the change in format?
Yeah, I would say the reach
Hmm.
has been greater, right? Because the way that it initially kicked off, unless you lived, like, in the East Valley of Phoenix,
Hmm.
you never could experience Boss Talk before,
Yeah.
where now that it's a podcast, we have listeners really from all over the world.
Yeah.
So the reach has increased, so those struggles and those lessons and, like, those really raw moments that, like, we are having, it's not just to, like, like, these 20 women that are here in the East Valley, it's like anybody can
Wow.
listen. And I would say that there are actually, like, some men that are, like, faithful listeners and very vocal
Yeah.
about listening to Boss Talk, right? Even though it's not necessarily geared towards them, like, they
Hmm.
love it because they love hearing the perspective and they love hearing, like, the honest dialogue that we have.
Yeah.
So those are, I would say, some of the benefits of, moving from an in-person, kind of a situation to taking it into a more traditional podcast kind of a format.
Yeah, I'll even say after reading the book, there's you get into a groove reading and then once in a while you kind of get into your affirmation mode and it's like, "Boss up, girl." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Still applies to me. I just gotta reverse some things in my brain." Right? But all of the things that you're
Yes.
teaching, just for for the men that are watching this interview think are tuning out already, like, "Oh, this ain't for me." No, there's some really good lessons for everybody. It's not just for women. And so I that's one of the beauties. I love podcasting. I've been a part of podcasts, produced podcasts, and so I always say you're letting people in on a conversation they would otherwise not be allowed
Never,
into.
yeah, they'd never
Um,
hear, yeah.
it's beautiful to see that kind of manifest itself in this Boss Talk event that was once regional, now has a much more national, probably even international reach for people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now we're gonna pivot to the book, and
Okay.
so we're gonna start here with all the things that you have going on. Why was it important for you to now put the content that you do in so many other places and put it in a book form?
Well, so it didn't start off with the book per se, it
Hmm.
actually started off with the Boss Manifesto,
Okay.
which is in the first chapter,
Yes.
and, honestly, I was inspired to write that manifesto because being on social media, and we kinda talked about it earlier about, like, this praise for this hustle culture that's
Yeah.
out there, like, work,
Mhm.
work, 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 and if you're not hustling, somehow you're not a business owner or you're not a legit business owner or whatever the case may be. And I remembered seeing a colleague of mine post this picture of a coffee pot that
Mhm.
was almost empty, and it read something to the effect of, hey, at 6 a.m. I've already had like 5 phone calls, two of them were double booked, I'm so busy, whatever. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, that's reading to me, showing me that you're exhausted
Yeah.
right now because it's 6 a.m. and you've already gone through a whole pot of coffee. But it was the cheering, I think, and the praise in the comments of that,
Yeah.
"You go, girl," like, "Hustle till you die," or "You can rest when you're dead," like,
Mhm.
whatever. And I was just like, "Why are we celebrating this?" Like, not to knock, like, you doing business your way,
Yeah.
right? I mean, to each his own, but why are we celebrating the fact that, like, somebody is, like, working themselves to exhaustion and
Mhm.
literally telling them, "Good job. You can rest when you're dead."
Yep.
And I was just like, "I'm done with this." And
Mm.
so that is actually, like, that first line of the
Yeah.
manifesto itself, that I am done glorifying busyness.
Yeah.
And so it really started with that, and I wrote the manifesto, I think, like, 2 years ago. And then, um I'm sure that you read, about this in the book, but I
Mhm.
had a friend that passed away,
Mhm.
and, I talk about her in the chapter that is, "There is no reward for overworked woman of the year,"
Yeah.
and I remember sitting at her funeral just obviously grieving because, like, my friend was gone,
Mhm.
but angry because, during the time where, like, family and friends can get up and, say, some words about the person, person after person after person got up and was just like, "You know what? She gave everything to everybody
Mm.
else. She always prioritized others over herself.
Yeah.
She put other people's needs before her own." Um, and that was just kinda like the message that was kinda shared person after person after person, and while I understood the sentiment
Mhm.
behind what they were saying, I think every time I heard somebody utter, a phrase that way, it made me cringe, and it kind of made me, um, more angry about the loss of my friend because it was just like, "You know what? You're right." Like, she didn't prioritize herself
Mhm.
over others, and nobody else did either. Like,
Yeah.
they always wanted more, needed her to be more, needed her to do more,
Yeah.
and, I think that that expectation and kind of herself to that pace ultimately led to her not being here,
Yeah.
and so it was like, "You know what? Enough is enough. I can't continue to, like, kinda idly sit by while I am literally watching women work themselves into a grave."
Mm. Wow.
And so I my editor was actually at that funeral. She had flown in from Texas,
Mhm.
because she was with this person as well, and, we met, and I said, "I'm ready to get this out." And she said, "Okay." So we set up our time and we met and we, sketched out the outline for the book and, what my writing timeline needed to be,
Mhm.
and I started writing.
Wow. So there's quite a few themes that are prevalent throughout the whole book, but there's a
Mhm.
particular word that kept coming up that really caught my attention, and that was overfunctioning.
Mm, mhm,
Came up quite a bit, and so you kind of define that as doing more than what is necessary, more than is appropriate, and more than is healthy.
mhm,
And I just through the lens of my own experience, especially during the pandemic when everything was done from home and the boundaries blur between what what is work hours, what is home hours. Um, and as a person that I would definitely describe myself as over functioning. You have it ingrained in your mind to do more than what's asked of you. And
mhm.
so when you take down the barriers of work at home, that becomes a whole lot easier to do and a lot more normal. So, what do you think are the keys to figuring out if you are an over functioning person?
Yeah, I think that I outline, like, some of those, like, "Hey, if you're doing this or feeling this or whatever, like, you might be an
Uh huh.
overfunctioner." So, I would take a look at those and
Yeah.
kinda see, like, do those things, feel resonant to, like, how you're feeling and how you're living right now? And
Mhm.
if it does, acknowledge that, like, "Oh, this might be something that I am doing routinely that
Yeah.
is actually harming me."
Yeah.
And then I think that after you acknowledge that, then it's just like, what can I do to maybe put some boundaries in place to start shifting away from that behavior
Mhm.
and taking on, I think, a healthier, behavior for yourself.
Mhm.
Um, you and those around you kinda have to unlearn and relearn, some things about, expectations, things like that, realistic,
Yeah.
capacities and things like
Yeah.
that, for you to be able to, I think, like, be in recovery from overfunctioning because it's so easy to do, like, even just a few months ago, like, my husband was going away on a men's retreat, and his best friend was coming in, and I had had this dream that they had gone to the school to, like, take our son to lunch, like, before they left to go to
Mhm.
the mountaintop, right?
Mhm.
And, they were both like, "Oh, it's a great idea, we should do that," and I'm like, "Cool," and I immediately go into like, well, let me like reach out to the teacher and like give her a heads up so I can get him signed out and like I can go to the school. And I was like, wait a second. Like, and I remember responding to them. I said, you know what? I said, you both are fathers and very capable people. I was like, if this is something you want to move forward with, I have full confidence
Uh-huh.
that between the two of you, you can figure out how to go to that school, communicate with that teacher, and sign your son and godson out of school for lunch. I don't need to do that.
Yeah.
I don't need to take that on. I don't need to be the one to facilitate that. And it's like, that's where it's just like, oh, I recognize that over functioning in myself. And it's
Yeah.
just like, that's not for me to do.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna take that on because they didn't ask me to do that. They didn't say,
Right.
"Hey, Lavisa, well, can you like make these arrangements?" It was just like, okay, like let me jump into like do it mode and
Yeah.
like take care of it because if I don't take care of it, it's not gonna get taken care of or it's not gonna get taken care of right. And it's just like, who taught us that?
Yeah.
So we have to unlearn that and relearn how to actually live life, with our life partners and those that are around us in a way that's just like nobody's asking you to take this stuff on. Like, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Stop.
Yeah. That I mean, the another quote from the book that came to mind is that you can do anything, but you can't do everything.
Yeah.
And that's something that I I literally will sometimes be in meetings and somebody will ask for thoughts on something, and I have to think, do I really have something to say right now on this? Do I need to? No, I'm good. We're good on this. I don't think I need
Hmm.
to engage in that.
Yeah.
Another thing you talked about in the book, you talked about some BS, and that is boss shame.
Yes. BS.
So, as a
Yes.
solopreneur, as a person who's also in leadership in some other places as well, that is boss shame is very real. You don't want to be seen
Hmm.
as vulnerable. You don't want to be seen as needing help. You want to be Superman for your
Hmm.
team, for your whether it's yourself or your team. You want to be Superman. Um, what does it what do you think keeps people the most from getting the help that they need? You talk about this in the book, but if there's either one or two examples, what do you think are the two things or a couple things that keep people from getting the help that they need?
Pride.
Mm,
Pride. Right. You
mhm,
you you said it right.
mhm,
Especially as business owners, like, you're supposed to know
yeah.
everything, or at least that's what we tell ourselves,
Yeah.
right? Like, "I'm the boss. I should know how to make this decision or to do this to get the outcome that I should just know," and it's just like, again, who told you that, right? Like,
Mhm,
most business owners are good at doing the thing that brings money into the business.
mhm,
It does not mean that because you're a business owner that you're automatically an amazing administrative,
yeah.
person or a marketer or a salesperson or like
Mhm,
any of these other things, but we think that we're supposed to, right? Like,
mhm,
I'm the boss, I should know how to do this and this and this and this and this. And I think that, we talked about earlier, like how I used to start, those in-person boss talks. Like, what do you need, right? Like, to put our hand up and say, well, I need help with this, or this, or I'm struggling with this, it does put us in a very vulnerable state, right? Because that's typically not how you approach people and invite them to come work with you by saying, hey, here are my problems that
mhm,
I'm dealing with. Like, you should come work with me anyway.
yeah.
But, if we're not willing to kind of get over ourselves and get out of our own way, we spend a lot of time stuck in those places
Mm,
where like we need help or we need some support. You might just need like a different point of view to like look at a situation, right? So that you can look at it through a different lens and like, oh, okay, I hadn't thought about it that way. This is how I can actually, bring the solution, to the table. But I think that pride like,
mhm,
keeps a lot of us stuck, because we don't wanna show up as, like, less than, who we think that we're supposed to present ourselves as
yeah,
in the
yeah.
marketplace.
And that I think that pride also comes into play. And you talked about it a little bit earlier in the conversation of we think that the results are on the other side of this work. We assume that we see this image of a hustler and a grinder, and we assume that if we do these things, then the success whatever the end result we want is on the other side of that. But I think what your book does a good thing, a good lesson in is sacrificing yourself is not the best business practice to
Mm-mm.
be moving forward with.
No, not at all, because, you are not replaceable.
Yeah.
You're not replaceable, right? Like, even talking about, like, my, burnout, scenario, in corporate, and thinking about, like, the time that it took for me to rebound,
Hmm.
from that, like, I'll never get that time
Yeah.
back. I'll never get that time back. I'll never get, um that that time that I was just, like, in complete, like, mental and physical chaos. Like, I'll never get those moments back, and it's just like, when I look at the grand scheme of things, and it was like, "Okay, yeah, the money was really good, but was it was it worth it?
Yeah.
Was it worth me having to take, short-term or the doctor putting me on short-term
Hmm.
disability and eventually walking away from this job that I loved anyway?"
Yeah.
Right? Like, mm-mm, no, like, I'm way more valuable than any job,
Hmm.
any business, any kind of opportunity that comes up, which is why, I say that to truly fulfill the vision, you've gotta, also take care of the visionary. Like, if you're not
Yeah.
okay, so what that this, and this was a success? Like, are you gonna be able to enjoy it?
Yeah.
Are you even gonna be here?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think that the self-sacrifice is worth it.
Yeah. I love how you have really brought a lot of language to a lot of the things I think that people feel and aren't secure enough to really talk about. You bring some really good
Mm.
language to that, and you also kind of redefine terms. And one of them was boss. In your book, you break that down as battling overwhelm with systems of self care. So for people at home, what is a system of self care?
Well, it's systems and
Self
self-care.
systems and self care. Yeah.
Yes. So systems, whether you're a business owner, stay-at-home mom, corporate leader, you use systems every day.
Hmm.
And really all a system is the steps that you take to get from point A to point B,
Hmm.
right? Like I use the morning routine with like our son, as an example. That's a system.
Yeah.
He gets up at the same time every day. He has, the same stuff he's got to do. Like
Hmm.
he's got his bathroom stuff. He's got to, do his hair and brush his teeth and have his breakfast and pack his backpack, get his uniform on,
Hmm.
get, into the car for us to get him to school on time. It's the same thing every single day. And it's like, looking at those systems, especially as a business owner, figuring out how you can make them more efficient, use automation, technology, other people, resources,
Yeah.
right, to get those things done, to fire yourself from things that you shouldn't be doing, and to make the work easier.
Yeah.
Because whoever told us that the work has to be hard, like
Yeah.
they lied to
Yeah.
us, right? Like I want abundance and ease. Like I'm not trying to work hard.
Yeah.
I'm trying to work with excellence,
Uh-huh.
but I'm also trying to enjoy my life.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
it's funny that you say you want with ease. And so I remember growing up,
Mhm.
a big conflict that me and my parents have is that they didn't see me work hard.
Mhm.
Like my brain is all about like I want to be as efficient as I can with my time and to get things done as easy as possible as well as possible. Um
Mhm.
and so it's funny, and I've even been in corporate environments where it's like, Malcolm, it doesn't really look like you're working that hard. It's like, do you want to hear that the answer is I'm not really working that hard? Because I found the
But
easy way
if
to
you
do
have an
this.
excellent output, is my heart is me working
Yeah,
harder
yeah.
necessary, right? Like, I can remember being, like, in high school, in, like, a chemistry class, and, like, I remember I think I was, like, a sophomore, and I'm in this class with, like, these seniors, and they're kinda looking at me kind of crazy anyway, like, "Why are you in here? This is for upper class," and I'm like, "Well, I'm as smart as you, so that's why I'm here." And I remember getting, like, our first chemistry test back, and I failed it, and they're like, "So you're smart, huh? That test doesn't show that is true." And I'm like, "How is this even possible?" Right? And so, like, we're going through the answers in class, and I'm like, like, "Oh, like, I got that answer right." So I remember, like, putting a note, I was like, "I need to, like, talk to the teacher afterwards to at least, like, maybe I can get, like, my 53% up to, like, a 57." Like, I don't know, right? Like,
Uh,
this is still an F, but maybe it's, like, a higher F,
uh-huh.
and that might help me in the long run. But then it's like we go to the next one, and I'm like, "Wait, like, I got my answer right on that." And I'm like, "Well, wait a darn second, like, what is up?" And I remember talking to him after, he's like, "You didn't show me your work."
Mm,
And I'm like, "Huh?" He was like, "You didn't, reduce this formula and do this and da da da." I said, "But I didn't need to. Like, I know
mhm.
what putting this element and this element together is, and I
Yeah,
know that it's this new element, so that's what I wrote." I was like, "The answer is right." He's like, "But I didn't see how you got there. I didn't see the work that you put into it." I said, "But my brain did it." Like,
uh-huh.
it seemed extra and unnecessary
Yeah,
for me to write all this stuff out if my brain just knew how to put the stuff together.
yeah.
And he was like, so he gave me only partial credit
Wow.
for having every single right answer. So I think I negotiated back up to like maybe like a high C on that
Mhm.
test, right? And so he was like, from now on, you need to show your work. And I'm like, well, I mean, in my opinion, that's kind of dumb, but I mean, I'm trying to like ace this class. So I'm like, fine, I'll do
Mhm.
it. But it's just like, why? Like, why do we need to do this extra? Why do we
Yeah.
need to be busy for busy's sake? Why do I need to have 3 appointments scheduled at the same time so that I can say like, "Oh, I was so busy that, like, somebody else had to have this meeting and I had to do this because, oh, this," and it's just like, that's insane.
Mhm.
That's insane. Like, let me have a meeting, you know, give them the proposal that I have to make the income, the
Mhm.
revenue that I want for the rest of the week or for the rest of the month. Like, I don't need to have 75 sales calls. Like, I need to have 2, and I need them to pay me what I feel like my work is worth so that I can enjoy time with my son and take vacation and, not work on the weekends and clock out at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and not feel guilty about it.
Yeah.
And that's what I truly mean, like, I work with excellence, but I am expecting ease and abundance in doing it.
Mm. Ease and
I
abundance.
am not going to kill myself doing this work. I refuse.
I might have to take that and put it on a t-shirt. Ease and abundance.
Feel free, just send me your royalties.
So the last thing we'll talk about from the book is I think self-care is one of those buzzwords. It's everywhere. It seems like it's
Mhm.
everywhere, especially since the pandemic. Everybody's talking about self-care, self-care, self-care. But you talk
And
about
we should.
we
We
should.
should.
But you talked
Yeah.
about redefining self-care, and you kind of used this
Mhm.
example of one of your clients who was getting a massage every week and was not enjoying the massage, and it wasn't she wasn't feeling less stressed, she was feeling more stressed. And so you took her to a journey of kind of understanding what her love languages are, and finding,
Mhm.
hey, physical touch is really low for you, so that's why this isn't recharging. And her response was,
Mhm.
oh, but that's what everybody else is doing, so I thought that's what I was supposed to be doing.
Mhm.
And then you kind of talked through your journey of finding you kind of broke down your morning routine and how that gets you ready for the day and one of your rhythms of self-care. So what do you think are the keys to finding those rhythms and routines that will work for you and not just doing what Instagram tells you is self-care?
Mhm. Yes. So it starts, Malcolm, with defining what self-care means and looks like for
Hmm.
you. Because I think that you hit the nail on the head, right? It's not what they tell you it
Hmm.
is. Um, it's what it needs to be for you, right? Like, what's gonna work for you is not gonna work for me. Like, what's gonna work for your wife is not gonna work for you.
Yeah.
What's going to work for my son is not gonna work. It's an individual thing. And, you brought up the love language. Like, I think that we're so conditioned to look at love languages, like, with our partner,
Yeah.
that we're doing life with, but we don't look at how we're able or should be able to be fluent with that love language, like with
Yeah.
ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And how we take care of ourselves. And so I think that, one, you need to know what your love languages are. You need to be fluent in them, and not be dependent on somebody else to speak those to you,
Yeah.
right? Which is a lesson in and of itself. Um, You need to speak those to yourself every day and incorporate those into just the way you live your life and the way that you run your business.
Yeah.
And then define, and it starts with, I think, defining like what does self care actually mean
Yeah.
to you? And then make it a non negotiable for you to get more of that every
Yeah.
single day. Like, one of the examples that I share in the book is like, okay, let's say you are a words of affirmation
Mhm.
person. It's really high. It's one of your dominant love languages. So we would work together to put like a solid testimonial system in place. So like when you're done working with a particular client, you offboard them away for us to always and consistently reach out and ask for testimonial feedback. Like, how was it working with Malcolm?
Yeah.
How was it working with Lavista?
Mhm.
Because it does a couple of things, right? It makes your presence in the marketplace consistent
Mhm.
because you have a system set up for it. So you're showing up in the marketplace the way that you want to, the same way every single time. It's not haphazard or like when you remember to like reach out and get this. The other thing that it does as that business owner that has like a dominant words of affirmation love language, you start getting these little love letters essentially, right, from
Yeah.
your clients and those that you've worked with. And what that's going to do is that's going to charge your battery as the business owner, but that's like baked into your process,
Yeah.
right? Because the other thing that I want to emphasize is that I don't believe that like self-care is like this additional thing to add
Yeah.
to your to-do, right? Because if it if you look at it that way, it's going to stress you out even
Mhm.
more like, oh, I didn't self-care today, right? It's like, okay, right? Or you look at it very transactional, like, "Oh, well, I self-cared on Monday.
Mm.
I don't need to do that." And it's like, no, you might not do it the way you wanna do it every day, and
Yeah.
you've gotta extend grace to yourself as you go through and walk out this journey on a daily basis, but it's gotta be intentional. And you've gotta do it daily in ways that is just it's the way that you live your life, it's your lifestyle. It's not this thing that you're checking off of a to-do list to say, "Okay, I did it. I self-cared today." Like, that's not really the way that it
Yeah.
works.
And in it I don't think if you do I mean, obviously, you know this, but I don't think if you do self-care that way, it's gonna help you avoid burnout. You will still eventually it may stave it off for a little bit, but if it's not a regular rhythm, a regular part of your life, I think that was one of the adjustments I had to make. Like, I had to actually, having a job, at a church, that means the weekends aren't really the weekend. Weekend is really when
Mhm.
a lot of my
When
other
you're
work
working.
starts.
Yeah.
So I had to pick a day. My pastor told me pick a day during the week where you just don't do anything. It just doesn't matter what it is. Communicate to me, like let me know so I'll know what it is. But pick a day, stick to it. Don't have any meetings. Don't just focus and recharge on that day. And
Mhm.
that was the hardest thing in the world for me to do because I am an overfunctioner. If I'm not doing something, I'm thinking, "Oh, I should be doing this. I could be doing this."
Yeah.
Um,
Shitting on yourself.
right. But then I had to go even once I got that, I then had to go beyond that. Then every day, how am I doing that? Whether it's working
Mhm.
out every day, whether it's getting up and walking around the apartment complex, or playing with, just spending time with my dog that he desperately wants. Usually at moments when I cannot give it
Do it,
to
yeah, gives you that addiction. Yeah, and so, Malcolm, in the book, I talk about this spa
him.
method
Hmm.
that I came up with, like, for my clients, right? That, you might be so far removed, right, from the things that, like, I call, like, that are on your joy list. Like, what are those
Yeah.
things that you actually enjoy? Because again, kinda going back to, like, love languages, I think that as you get older and you start, getting into relationships that are more significant and,
Hmm.
building careers and businesses and things like that, if you're not careful, like, you start losing little pieces of yourself,
Yeah.
right? And so you're like, "Oh, in my 20s, I used to, like, sit for hours and, like, do crossword puzzles at the Barnes& and Noble."
Yeah.
And it's like now in your 40s, you can't remember the last time you even looked at a
Yeah.
crossword puzzle or stepped into a Barnes& and Noble.
Hmm.
And so it's just like you have to, um, fight, I think, to hold on to those pieces of yourself
Yeah.
that bring you joy and be able to get those in. And so one of the ways, that I tell clients to, like, start getting some of those things in if they're not, used to it, is having a spa day,
Mhm.
right? So, the S, doing something smart, doing something that challenges your mind,
Mhm.
whatever that might be. You might be learning Italian, or you
Mhm.
might be listening to a podcast or a TED Talk or something that stimulates your mind and,
Mhm.
like, is challenging you. The P is doing something physical,
Mhm.
right? So it might be going and taking a walk around the neighborhood or taking that yoga class or going for a hike on, a Saturday or something like that. And then the third is A, doing something affirming. So doing
Yeah.
something that affirms you. Um, and just kind of like speaks like life into you. And it's like if you can start incorporating those things into like your daily routine, like I think that you start like making deposits into like your own kind of love bank, and like then you're not living and working from a place of depletion. And it's like it gets easier to incorporate things into your lifestyle. It gets easier to lean into and own like your boundaries around your time and about how you're going to spend your time and things that you're going to do. It gets easier to identify like, oh, I'm over functioning in this
Mm.
moment. This is how I course correct, right?
Yeah.
Here right now, and not beat yourself up about, hey, I didn't do this well for myself in the past.
Mhm.
Do it well now,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, like that's actually a method, that I suggest, like, if you're kind of getting started and you're like, "I don't even know what to
Yeah.
do," like, do that.
Mhm.
Do those things, like, explore, and get reconnected with yourself. That's the only way you're gonna be able to know how to fully take care of yourself and recharge your battery.
Yeah. That's really good. So before we leave, we've got the book,
Mhm.
we got the podcast, we got 31 Marketplace. What is next? I know you're really focused probably on the book right now, but what else can we
Yeah.
look at from LaVista Jones?
Well, that's a really good question. Um I would dare to say that the next book project is already ruminating in my
Okay.
mind right now, so, not really sure when that's going to hit the marketplace, but
Okay.
it's noodling in there. I think in the next year to come, right,
Mhm.
with the focus of the book, really just kinda leveraging the momentum
Yeah.
around the book. I'm just fresh back from Ohio from,
Mhm.
the book tour sites that we had there.
Mhm.
We've got some more, cities that we're going to into, like, the new year. But there are some retreats that are coming up, that will help incorporate, systems and self-care, actually living, this boss shift, like, actually embracing
Yeah.
it, as business owner and, just some unique ways to work with me and my team,
Mhm.
coming up in the new year, so,
Awesome. Well, how can people
yeah.
connect with you?
If they're looking for the book itself, they can always go to embracingtheshift.com.
Mhm.
It gives like the full overview of the book. You can order it, and the companion like coaching journal that goes along with it, as well as like the other resources that are actually outlined in the book itself, are out there. But if you're wanting to just kind of connect with me and kind of see what I am doing in the marketplace, you can find me at LaVista Jones kind of everywhere. You can go to
Mhm.
lavistajones.com on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, LaVista Jones. Pretty easy to find.
Well, thank you so much, LaVista. Everyone, man, woman, whoever you are, you will want to buy this book, The Boss Shift. Go to is it embracingtheshift.com?
Yep.
Embracingtheshift.com to learn more about the book and find places to get it. Thank you so much, LaVista, for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Malcolm.
Again, thank you so much, LaVista, for taking the time to be a part of our show this week. And for everyone out there, the Boss Shift book, whether you're a man or woman, entrepreneur, or whatever, this book can help you find healthy rhythms of self-care that will help sustain you no matter what field of work you're in. So make sure you get that book, The Boss Shift by LaVista Jones. Real quick before we leave, make sure you check out our website, urbanartsdigital.com, where you can find more about this and other shows. We have our video exclusively on the website, but you can listen to the audio of this show on Apple and wherever else you listen to podcasts. And you can follow me on social media at malcolm.media on Twitter and on Instagram. Thank you guys so much for joining us this week. We'll see you all next time.